The morning sun filtered through the massive crystal dome of the Galactic Academy, casting rainbow patterns across the central courtyard where hundreds of alien students gathered for the new semester. 3 young humans stood near the registration terminal, looking remarkably ordinary among the sea of exotic beings that surrounded them. Alex adjusted her simple backpack and watched a group of Vorthon students nearby. Their bodies looked like living gemstones, with faceted surfaces that caught the light and threw it back in brilliant flashes. One of them, who wore a translation badge reading Quill, was explaining something to his friends in their musical language of chimes and tones. "Look at those new arrivals," Quill said, his crystalline form shifting colors from blue to purple. "The humans from that backwater planet. I heard their world doesn't even have proper energy shields around their cities." Ryan, a stocky young man with dirt still under his fingernails from his last geology field trip, didn't understand the alien language, but could sense they were being discussed. He nudged Maya, a tall woman whose dark eyes seemed to constantly analyze everything around them. "They're talking about us," Maya whispered. "Of course they are," Alex replied quietly. "We probably look pretty boring compared to them." Nearby, a Nethi student named Nex floated in his environmental suit, his gaseous form swirling with bioluminescent patterns. His species communicated through light displays, and right now his colors showed amusement. "Primitive electromagnetic communication," he pulsed to his companion. "They actually move their mouth parts to make sound waves. How inefficient." A Corvani student called Rays overheard the conversation. Her thick, scaled hide gleamed under the academy lights, and her powerful frame made her tower over most other students. "At least the Nethys have evolved beyond physical forms," she rumbled in her deep voice. "These humans still have soft skin and brittle bones. I could probably break one just by shaking hands too hard." The 3 human students continued through the registration process, unaware of the dismissive comments flowing around them. The Galactic Academy had been accepting students from over 200 different species for almost 1,000 years. But Earth had only been invited to send representatives 5 years ago. Most species still considered humans to be newcomers who hadn't proven themselves worthy of serious attention. Professor Vel 9 materialized at the center of the courtyard, his mechanical form rising from the floor on hidden lifts. His artificial intelligence had been teaching at the academy for centuries, and his voice carried clearly across the space without any visible sound equipment. "Welcome, students, to another year of learning and discovery," Vel 9 announced. "This semester, all students will participate in our expanded survival simulation program. You will be tested across multiple planetary environments to assess your adaptability, problem-solving skills, and ability to work with other species." Excited chatter erupted among the alien students. The Vorthons chimed enthusiastically about their natural resistance to energy-based hazards. The Nethys pulsed with confidence about their ability to survive in atmospheric conditions that would kill most other species. The Corvani students flexed their powerful muscles and discussed their advantages in high-gravity environments. "The simulations have been upgraded this year," Professor Vel 9 continued. "Each environment will present genuine challenges that could be encountered during real exploration missions. Your performance will be evaluated not just on survival, but on how well you can assist and cooperate with students from other species." Quill's crystalline form shifted to a confident gold color. "This should be easy," he told his friends. "My species has been exploring dangerous worlds for millennia. We know how to handle extreme conditions." Nex's bioluminescent display showed agreement. "The Nethys have adapted to survive in the vacuum of space itself. Whatever they throw at us, we can handle it." Rays cracked her knuckles, producing a sound like breaking stone. "Physical challenges are nothing new for the Corvani. We evolved on a world with crushing gravity and constant seismic activity." The 3 humans listened to the confident discussions around them, but stayed quiet. Alex had grown up hiking in the Rocky Mountains and swimming in frigid alpine lakes. Ryan had spent his childhood exploring caves and climbing cliffs that would terrify most people. Maya had lived through hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards that regularly devastated her home region. But they had learned not to mention these things to their alien classmates, who seemed to think Earth was some kind of peaceful garden world. Teams will be assigned randomly, Professor Vel 9 announced, to ensure maximum species diversity and learning opportunities. Your first simulation will begin tomorrow morning in Lab Complex 7. Prepare yourselves for Planet Aquatica 7, a water, world environment. As the crowd began to disperse, several alien students approached the humans with what they clearly thought was kindness. Quill's form shifted to a gentle blue-green color as he addressed them. "Don't worry about the simulations," he said through his translator. "We more experienced species will make sure you humans stay safe. These exercises can be quite dangerous for species that haven't evolved proper survival adaptations." Nex floated closer, his patterns showing what his species considered reassuring colors. "The Nethys have protocols for protecting fragile species during joint missions. We will share our advanced survival techniques with you." Rays bent down to their level, trying to appear less intimidating. "The Corvani always protect smaller, weaker species. You can stay behind us when things get dangerous." Alex, Ryan, and Maya exchanged glances. They had heard this kind of condescending concern from other alien students before. Most species seemed to view humans as some kind of delicate creatures who needed constant protection. The fact that Earth was classified as a Class M garden world in the galactic databases only reinforced this impression. "Thank you," Alex said politely. "We appreciate the offer." But as the alien students walked away, discussing their natural advantages and making plans to protect the fragile humans, none of them noticed the small smile that crossed Maya's face. She had read the environmental specifications for Aquatica 7 in the Academy database. The water pressure, toxic marine life, and storm systems would definitely be challenging. They just weren't challenging in any way that would surprise someone who had grown up swimming in Earth's oceans, where great white sharks were considered. A minor hazard and hurricane-force winds were a regular part of the weather forecast. Tomorrow was going to be very educational for everyone involved. The simulation chamber hummed to life as artificial gravity generators created the crushing weight of Aquatica 7's deep ocean environment. Water began flooding the massive space, bringing with it the sharp smell of alien minerals and the immediate pressure that made several students stumble backward in shock. Quill's crystalline body immediately began showing stress fractures as the water pressure increased. The beautiful gem-like surfaces that had gleamed so proudly yesterday now developed hairline cracks that spread across his form like spider webs. "The pressure differential is too extreme," he chimed in distress. "My molecular structure isn't designed for these rapid changes." Nex fared even worse. His gaseous form, usually so elegant floating in his environmental suit, compressed painfully as the dense liquid environment squeezed his containment systems. His bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically, showing panic in colors that shifted, from bright yellow to deep red. "Cannot maintain proper density," he pulsed frantically. "This atmosphere is suffocating my essence." Rays, despite her powerful build and thick scales, discovered that her species' heavy bone structure worked against her in this environment. She sank like a stone the moment she entered the deeper water, her powerful legs churning uselessly as she struggled to reach the surface. "Corvani are not meant for aquatic environments," she gasped, fighting to keep her head above water. "Our density is too high for buoyancy." Meanwhile, the three humans moved through the water with an ease that shocked their struggling classmates. Alex had taken a deep breath before the chamber filled completely and now glided through the murky depths like she belonged there. Her movements were smooth and efficient, conserving oxygen while covering surprising distances underwater. Ryan seemed completely unbothered by the toxic minerals that were making other students violently ill. He actually tasted the water and spat it out with nothing more than a grimace. "Sulfur content is high," he called to his teammates, "but not dangerous. It's like swimming in a natural hot spring back home." Maya studied the artificial sky above the water surface, watching the way the light moved and the air currents shifted. Within minutes, she was pointing toward the far end of the chamber. "Major storm system building from that direction. We've got maybe 30 minutes before it hits. We need shelter." The alien students looked at her in confusion. Their advanced sensors showed only minor atmospheric disturbances, nothing that registered as dangerous. But the humans were already moving, and something in their calm certainty made the others follow. As they swam toward what appeared to be a rocky outcropping, a massive shadow passed overhead. The water around them suddenly darkened, and several students looked up to see something that made their blood run cold. A predator the size of a small starship was circling above them, its bioluminescent patches pulsing in patterns that clearly indicated hunting behavior. Most of the alien students froze in terror. The creature was larger than anything they had ever encountered, with rows of teeth that could crush their environmental suits like paper. Its movements showed the kind of efficient aggression that spoke of millions of years of evolution as an apex predator. But the humans reacted differently. Instead of panicking, they immediately fell into a coordinated pattern that looked like they had practiced it hundreds of times before. Alex began making sharp, erratic movements that drew the creature's attention away from the group. Her swimming style changed completely, mimicking the desperate struggles of injured prey while actually maintaining perfect control of her direction and speed. Ryan and Maya used the distraction to guide the terrified alien students toward the rocky shelter. They moved with quiet efficiency, giving calm, clear instructions that somehow cut through the panic that had seized their classmates. "Stay low, move steady, don't splash," Maya whispered. "Predators track erratic movement and electrical signatures." The massive creature took the bait and dove toward Alex with frightening speed. But instead of being caught, she twisted away at the last second and disappeared into a crevice that looked too small to provide safety. The predator's snapping jaws closed on empty water, and its momentum carried it past the hiding spot. "How did she know it would miss?" Quill chimed weakly, his stress fractures still spreading across his form. "She read its attack pattern," Ryan replied, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Sharks and other large aquatic predators always telegraph their strikes. You just have to know what to look for." By the time Alex rejoined the group in their shelter, the storm Maya had predicted was beginning to build overhead. The artificial weather system created winds that turned the water surface into a churning mass of whitecaps and dangerous currents. Lightning began flashing across the simulated sky, each bolt accompanied by thunder that shook the water around them. The alien students huddled in terror as the storm intensified beyond anything their homeworlds had ever produced. But the humans seemed almost comfortable, like this was just another day at the beach. They took turns staying near the entrance of their shelter, monitoring the storm's progress and the movements of various predators that continued to circle despite the dangerous conditions. "The pressure differential suggests this will last about 6 hours, Maya announced, settling back against the rocky wall. "We should ration our emergency oxygen and take shifts sleeping." "Sleep?" Necks pulsed in disbelief. "In this environment? With those creatures hunting us?" Alex smiled and closed her eyes. "One of us will always be on watch. Besides, that big predator won't come back near the rocks. The electrical discharge from the lightning will disrupt its sensory organs, and the current changes will make hunting too difficult." As if to prove her point, the massive creature that had terrified them earlier swam past their shelter and disappeared into the deeper waters, apparently deciding that hunting in the storm wasn't worth the effort. Quill's crystalline form had stabilized somewhat in the calmer water of their shelter, but his colors showed deep confusion. "You humans act like this is normal," he chimed softly, "like you've encountered these conditions before." Ryan shrugged, keeping his eyes on the storm outside. "Not exactly these conditions, but Earth's oceans aren't that different. Bigger predators, maybe, more unpredictable weather, but the basic principles are the same. Your planet has predators. Larger than that creature?" Reyes asked in disbelief. "Blue whales are about the same size," Alex replied drowsily. "But they're not predators. The really dangerous stuff is smaller and faster. Great whites, tiger sharks, saltwater crocodiles. Things that can catch you before you know they're there." The alien students stared at the humans in growing amazement. Throughout the night, as the storm raged around their shelter, they watched. Their human classmates take turns on watch with the kind of calm competence that spoke of real experience. These weren't theoretical survival skills learned in a classroom. These were instincts developed over generations of evolution on a world that demanded constant vigilance. When morning came and the storm finally passed, Professor Vel 9's voice echoed through the chamber, announcing the end of the simulation. As the water began to drain away, the alien students found themselves looking at their human classmates with new eyes. They had always assumed that coming from a garden world meant the humans were soft and inexperienced. But watching them navigate the deadly waters of Aquatica 7 with such skill and calm made them wonder what kind of garden could produce such capable survivors. Maybe it was time to take a closer look at this planet called Earth. Heat shimmers danced across the endless dunes as the simulation chamber transformed into the brutal environment of Scorchia Prime. The temperature reading on the wall display climbed rapidly past 180 degrees and kept rising, while moisture levels dropped to less than 1% humidity. Within minutes, the air became so dry that several students began coughing as their respiratory systems struggled to process the desiccated atmosphere. Quill's crystalline form, still bearing hairline fractures from the previous simulation, began to develop new stress patterns as the extreme temperature differential took its toll. The rapid heating caused his molecular structure to expand unevenly, creating internal pressures that made him move stiffly and carefully. "These temperature extremes are beyond Vorthon tolerances," he chimed weakly. "Our crystalline matrix requires stable thermal conditions." Nex had sealed himself completely inside his environmental suit, but even the advanced life support systems were struggling to maintain proper atmospheric composition for his gaseous form. His bioluminescent patterns had dimmed to barely visible levels as he conserved energy. "Cannot process this environment," he pulsed faintly. "Too dense, too hot, too dry." Reyes fared better than her classmates initially, as the Corvani were adapted for harsh conditions. But even her thick scales began showing signs of dehydration within the first hour, and her powerful muscles cramped as her body struggled to regulate temperature through normal mechanisms. "This heat is like standing inside a fusion reactor," she groaned. "How is anything supposed to survive here?" The three humans, however, seemed to settle into the environment with the same unsettling ease they had shown in the ocean simulation. Alex had quickly shed her outer layer of clothing and tied her hair back, creating better airflow around her neck and head. She moved with deliberate economy, never wasting energy on unnecessary actions. Ryan had already begun reading the landscape like a book, studying the patterns in the sand dunes and the way shadows fell across different geological formations. Within 20 minutes, he was leading the group toward a rocky outcropping that promised shelter from the worst of the heat. "Wind patterns suggest there's a natural cave system about half a mile that direction," he said, pointing toward what looked like empty desert to the alien students. Maya had begun rationing the water supplies with mathematical precision, calculating exactly how much each team member needed based on their species biology and the predicted duration of the simulation. But what amazed the alien students was how little water the humans themselves seemed to require. They drank sparingly, and showed no signs of the distress that was already affecting their classmates. As the day progressed and the temperature soared past 200 degrees, the alien students began to understand why this simulation was considered so dangerous. Quill's stress fractures deepened until he could barely move without risk of structural failure. Nex's life support systems began throwing warning alerts as they struggled to maintain his gaseous form in the extreme conditions. Even Ray's, with all her natural toughness, was panting heavily and moving sluggishly, but the humans continued to function normally. They found the cave system that Ryan had predicted, established a cooling shelter using principles that seemed to come naturally to them, and began sharing their water rations without being asked. When Quill's crystalline form began developing dangerous fractures, Alex showed him how to use wet fabric and controlled airflow to create localized cooling that stabilized his molecular structure. "How do you know these techniques?" Quill asked, as his stress fractures slowly began to heal. "This knowledge doesn't appear in any survival manual I've studied." Alex looked surprised by the question. "It's just basic desert survival. You learn this stuff growing up in places like Arizona or Nevada. My family used to go camping in Death Valley every summer." Death Valley? Nex pulsed weakly from inside his environmental suit. "Your people name places after mortality?" "It's not that bad once you know what you're doing," Ryan replied, checking the cave entrance for signs of the approaching night. "The real trick is understanding how quickly things change when the sun goes down." As if summoned by his words, the artificial sun began to set, and the temperature started dropping with shocking speed. Within an hour, the thermometer readings plummeted from over 200 degrees to below freezing, and frost began forming on the cave walls. The alien students, already weakened by the heat, now found themselves facing a completely different set of challenges. Quill's crystalline form, which had just begun to stabilize, now faced the opposite problem, as rapid cooling caused new contractions and stress patterns. Nex's life support systems struggled to adjust to the dramatic temperature swing. Ray's thick scales provided some insulation, but her weakened state left her shivering uncontrollably. The humans, meanwhile, began implementing cold-weather survival techniques with the same calm competence they had shown during the heat of the day. They rebuilt their shelter to retain body heat, shared their remaining warm clothing without being asked, and maintained a careful watch schedule throughout the night. But what truly impressed the alien students was how the humans handled the sandstorm that struck just before midnight. Maya had been tracking atmospheric pressure changes and warned everyone to prepare for severe weather, but the alien students hadn't understood what she meant until the wind began howling and visibility dropped to zero. The storm brought with its sand particles moving at over 60 miles per hour, turning the air into an abrasive cloud that could strip flesh from bone. The alien students huddled in terror as their shelter shook under the assault, certain that they were about to die in this howling nightmare. But the humans moved through the storm like they had trained for it their entire lives. When part of their shelter collapsed, Alex crawled out into the screaming wind to repair it, her body barely visible in the swirling sand. Ryan secured their water supplies and guided panicking alien students to safer positions within the cave. Maya maintained a mental map of wind direction and storm intensity, providing constant updates that allowed them to adjust their shelter accordingly. "This is impossible," Ray's shouted over the howling wind. "No species could evolve to handle conditions this extreme." "You haven't seen extreme yet," Maya replied, tying down another section of their improvised windbreak. "This is maybe a Category 2 storm. Back home, we get hurricanes that make this look like a gentle breeze." When morning finally came and the IE storm passed, the alien students emerged from their shelter to find a landscape that had been completely transformed. Dunes had shifted, rocky outcroppings had been buried, and the very geography of the area looked different. But the humans seemed unbothered by the changes, immediately beginning to assess their new situation and plan for the day ahead. Quill's crystalline form had survived the night, but barely. His colors were dim and his movements careful as he processed what he had experienced. "You humans," he chimed thoughtfully. "You don't just survive in these conditions. You seem almost comfortable." Alex helped him adjust the cooling system she had improvised for him. "Earth has deserts, too. Some of them get pretty harsh. You learn to adapt or you don't make it." Define harsh. Nex pulsed from his environmental suit, his bioluminescent patterns. Showing curiosity despite his exhaustion, Ryan considered the question while checking their remaining supplies. "Well, the Sahara Desert back home covers about 3.5 million square miles. Summer temperatures regularly hit 136 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and can drop below freezing at night. Add in sandstorms, flash floods, and the occasional volcanic activity from the surrounding mountain ranges." The alien students stared at him in disbelief. "Your species lives in environments like that voluntarily?" Reyes asked. "People have been crossing the Sahara for thousands of years," Maya replied. "It's actually one of the major trade routes on our planet. Caravans still use it regularly." As Professor Vel 9's voice announced the end of the simulation and the chamber began returning to normal conditions, the alien students found themselves looking at their human classmates with something approaching awe. These weren't the soft, inexperienced beings they had assumed. These were survivors from a world that regularly produced conditions more extreme than the Academy's most challenging simulations. And if a simple desert simulation had been this educational, they were beginning to wonder what the next challenge would reveal about the true nature of Earth and its inhabitants. The humans, meanwhile, were already discussing the upcoming simulation with the kind of casual interest that suggested they were actually enjoying these supposedly deadly challenges, which the alien students were beginning to realize was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. Warning lights bathed the simulation chamber in an ominous red glow as the environmental systems began generating the hellish conditions of Plague World Beta. Radiation detectors clicked rapidly as background radiation levels climbed to doses that would be lethal to most organic life within hours. The air filled with a cocktail of biological hazards, toxic spores, and aggressive microorganisms that immediately triggered every safety alarm in the facility. Several alien students collapsed within minutes of entering the simulation. Quill's crystalline form began clouding as radiation disrupted his molecular structure at the quantum level, turning his beautiful transparent surfaces into an opaque gray that spread like cancer through his body. Nex's environmental suit went into full lockdown mode, sealing him completely as his life support system struggled to filter out the contaminated atmosphere. Reyes, despite her thick natural armor, found herself vomiting violently as biological agents attacked her digestive system. Her powerful immune system, evolved to handle the diseases of her homeworld, had no defense against the alien pathogens that filled the air around them. "These toxin levels are beyond survivable parameters," she gasped between waves of nausea. "How is the simulation even legally allowed to reach these concentrations?" The three humans, however, walked through the contaminated environment like they were strolling through a park. They wore minimal protective gear compared to their alien classmates, yet showed no signs of distress from the radiation, toxins, or biological hazards that were hospitalizing everyone else. Alex knelt beside a patch of sickly-looking vegetation and examined the leaves carefully. Her scanner read them as highly toxic, containing alkaloids that could cause organ failure in most known species. But she rubbed a small piece between her fingers, smelled it, and even touched it briefly to her tongue before spitting it out. "These are actually edible once you remove the outer coating," she announced to the horrified alien students. "The toxins are concentrated in the waxy surface layer. Underneath, the plant matter is safe and high in nutrients." "The scanner says those plants will kill you," Quill chimed weakly from inside the emergency radiation shelter the humans had helped him construct. "Scanners don't know everything," Alex replied, beginning to process the vegetation with techniques that looked primitive but proved surprisingly effective. Sometimes you have to trust biological instincts over technology. Ryan had wandered off to examine the geological features of the simulated world and returned with an armload of what appeared to be highly radioactive rocks. The radiation detectors screamed warnings as he approached, but he seemed completely unbothered by exposure levels that should have given him acute radiation poisoning. "Found a natural spring about 200 meters northeast," he reported. "Water's got some mineral content that might bother sensitive digestive systems, but it's safe for long-term consumption. The radiation levels are actually lower near the water source." Maya looked up from where she was studying atmospheric readings. "That makes sense. The geological activity would create natural shielding effects. The radiation we're experiencing here isn't actually that extreme by Earth standards. This casual comment made all the alien students stop what they were doing and stare at her. Nex's bioluminescent patterns flickered with confusion and disbelief. "Not extreme? The radiation levels in this simulation would sterilize most inhabited worlds." "Really?" Maya checked her readings again, comparing them to the reference charts in her portable database. "Huh. These levels are about the same as some of the beaches back home. Maybe a little higher than background radiation in most cities, but nothing you'd worry about for short-term exposure." The alien students exchanged glances filled with growing alarm. Rays, still fighting waves of nausea from the biological agents, in the air, managed to ask the question they were all thinking. "What exactly is your homeworld like?" The humans paused in their work, seeming to realize for the first time that their casual attitude toward these supposedly deadly conditions was unusual. Alex sat back on her heels and considered the question carefully. "Earth," she said finally. "I guess it depends on what you mean. It's a pretty typical terrestrial planet. We've got some nice temperate zones, some desert regions, a few polar ice caps, standard stuff." "Define typical," Quill chimed insistently, his clouded form struggling to process what he was hearing. Ryan looked up from the rock samples he was examining. "Well, we've got about 70% water coverage. The atmosphere is roughly 21% oxygen, which is pretty reactive stuff. There's a magnetic field that deflects most of the solar radiation, but plenty still gets through." Background. Radiation varies by location, but it's usually manageable. "The weather systems can get pretty intense," Maya added. "We get hurricanes that cover hundreds of miles with wind speeds over 200 miles per hour, tornadoes that can level entire cities, blizzards that dump several feet of snow in a few hours, the usual seasonal variations." Nex's patterns showed deep disturbance. "You describe these as normal weather events?" "Sure," Alex said, continuing to process the toxic plants into something resembling food. "Most populated areas have early warning systems and proper shelter construction. You learn to live with it." "What about seismic activity?" Reyes asked weakly. "Pretty standard," Ryan replied. "We get earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. The ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean is particularly active, but human civilization adapted to work around the geological instabilities." The alien students were beginning to look at the humans with something approaching horror. Quill's crystalline form was slowly recovering in his radiation shelter, but his colors showed deep confusion. "Your species evolved on a world with all these hazards simultaneously?" "Evolved with them," Maya corrected. "The radiation, the weather extremes, the geological activity, the biological hazards. They weren't obstacles to overcome. They were just part of the environment we adapted to survive in." "And the other life forms on your world?" Nex pulsed hesitantly. Alex grinned, apparently not realizing how terrifying her expression was becoming. To her alien classmates, "Oh, Earth has some pretty impressive biodiversity. We've got predators that can take down prey 10 times their size, parasites that can control host behavior, venomous creatures that can kill with a single bite. The ocean ecosystems are particularly rich. The deep ocean trenches go down over 35,000 feet," Ryan added helpfully. Pressure down there would crush most surface life instantly. But we've got creatures living in those conditions that are bigger than most spaceships. And they coexist with your civilization? Reyes asked in disbelief. Well, mostly, Maya said. We've had to drive a few species extinct when they became too dangerous or competed too directly with human expansion. But that's just natural selection. At work. Most estimates suggest about 99% of all species that ever lived on Earth have gone extinct. The silence that followed this statement was broken only by the continued clicking of radiation detectors and the hum of life support systems working overtime to keep the alien students alive in conditions that the humans seemed to find mildly pleasant. Quill's crystalline form had stabilized somewhat, but his colors were shifting through patterns that indicated deep philosophical confusion. You're telling us that your species not only survived on a world that regularly experiences conditions similar to our most extreme military training environments, but that you thrived enough to develop space travel and join the galactic community. Is that unusual? Alex asked, genuinely puzzled by their reaction. The alien students looked at each other, then back at the humans, who were continuing to work efficiently in an environment that was slowly killing everyone else, despite advanced protective equipment and medical support. Professor Vel 9's voice echoed through the chamber, announcing that they had successfully completed the third simulation and would be moving to the final challenge the following day. As the environmental systems began neutralizing the various hazards and returning the chamber to safe conditions, the alien students found themselves reassessing everything they thought they knew about their human classmates. These weren't primitive beings from a backwater garden world. These were apex survivors from a planet that regularly produced conditions more dangerous than anything the Galactic Academy had in its simulation libraries. And tomorrow's final simulation was supposed to be the most challenging test they had ever designed. The humans were already discussing it with the kind of enthusiasm that people usually reserved for vacation plans. Chaos 9 lived up to its name from the moment the simulation began. The chamber erupted into a perfect storm of every environmental hazard known to galactic science. Seismic tremors shook the ground, while hurricane-force winds carried clouds of toxic gas across a landscape dotted with active volcanic vents. Gravity fluctuated wildly as the simulation's field generators created pockets of crushing weight, alternating with areas of near weightlessness. The radiation levels spiked beyond anything the previous simulations had produced, while aggressive predators materialized from the shifting terrain. Most of the alien students didn't even make it past the initial environmental assessment. Quill's crystalline form immediately began developing catastrophic fractures as the multiple stress factors overwhelmed his molecular cohesion. Nex's life support systems failed within minutes, unable to cope with the combination of atmospheric toxins, radiation, and pressure variations. Reyes, despite her natural toughness, found herself pinned to the ground by gravitational forces that made her dense bone structure work against her. "This is impossible," she groaned, struggling to lift her head against the crushing weight. No species could survive these combined conditions. The simulation must be malfunctioning. But the three humans moved through the hellish landscape like they had been born to it. Alex tracked the massive predators that stalked the shifting terrain, reading their movement patterns and behavioral cues with an accuracy that made her alien classmates wonder if she possessed some kind of supernatural sense. When a pack of hunters the size of ground vehicles began circling their position, she guided the group along routes that kept them just outside the creature's attack range. "Predators this size are ambush hunters," she explained calmly, helping Quill navigate around a patch of unstable ground that would have collapsed under his weight. "They're not built for extended chases. As long as we don't trigger their strike reflex, we can use their territorial boundaries to create safe corridors." Ryan had become their geological guide, somehow reading the chaotic terrain like a familiar map. He predicted seismic events by feeling vibrations through his feet that registered as background noise to everyone else. When the ground began showing signs of imminent collapse, he led them to stable areas seconds before catastrophic fissures opened behind them. The harmonic resonance patterns indicate a major shift in about 30 seconds, he announced, guiding the struggling alien students toward higher ground. The volcanic activity is destabilizing the substrate in a cascade failure that will affect approximately 2 square kilometers. As if summoned by his words, the landscape behind them exploded upward as a new volcanic vent tore through the surface, sending fountains of molten rock hundreds of feet into the toxic atmosphere. Maya had become their weather and atmospheric specialist, reading pressure changes and chemical compositions that allowed her to predict environmental shifts with uncanny accuracy. When she announced that they had 15 minutes to find shelter before the approaching storm front arrived, the alien students had learned to trust her completely, despite the fact that their most advanced sensors showed only minor atmospheric disturbances. Barometric pressure is dropping too fast, she explained, leading them toward what looked like an exposed ridge but would provide crucial protection from the coming weather. The electrical activity in those clouds suggests we're looking at lightning strikes that will make the previous simulations look like gentle rain showers. But what truly amazed the alien students wasn't the humans' physical resilience or their environmental awareness. It was their psychological response to conditions that should have broken any rational mind. Where other species would have panicked, given up, or retreated into protective catatonia, the humans maintained an almost supernatural level of hope and determination. When Quill's crystalline structure finally suffered complete failure and he collapsed into a pile of broken fragments, Alex immediately began gathering the pieces while Ryan and Maya constructed an emergency shelter. They worked for hours in the toxic atmosphere, their hands bleeding from handling the sharp crystal shards, never once suggesting that they should abandon their classmate or conserve their energy for their own survival. "Why are you risking your lives for me?" Quill managed to chime weakly through his translation unit, which had somehow survived his structural collapse. "Logically, you should preserve your resources for species with better survival probability." "That's not how we do things," Alex replied, carefully sorting his crystal fragments by resonance frequency in an attempt to help him reform. "Nobody gets left behind. That's just basic human protocol." Nex, sealed in his failing life support suit, pulsed with confused bioluminescent patterns. "But the statistical probability of all of us surviving is essentially zero. Standard survival doctrine suggests sacrificing weaker individuals to preserve stronger specimens." Maya looked up from where she was monitoring atmospheric conditions. "Humans don't really do survival statistics like that. We're more of an all-or-nothing species. Either we all make it, or we go down fighting together." The alien students tried to process this mindset as they watched the humans continue their seemingly impossible rescue efforts. Ryan had disappeared into a landscape that was actively trying to kill him, searching for materials to repair Nex's life support systems. Alex continued working on Quill's crystal matrix despite radiation levels that should have given her fatal poisoning hours ago. Maya maintained constant watch for threats while providing medical support to Reyes, whose massive frame was struggling with the gravitational fluctuations. When the major seismic event finally struck, it came with a violence that dwarfed anything the previous simulations had produced. The ground split open in massive cracks that glowed with volcanic heat, while gravitational anomalies sent chunks of landscape spinning into the toxic atmosphere. Most of the alien students were trapped beneath debris or caught in areas that had become completely inaccessible. The humans responded with a coordination that seemed to transcend normal communication. Without discussion or planning, they divided the rescue operations between them, each taking responsibility for the alien students in the most dangerous situations. Alex rappelled into a fissure that was filling with poisonous gas to reach Quill's scattered remains. Ryan crawled through a maze of collapsed tunnels to reach Nex's sealed life support pod. Maya remained on the surface, directing their efforts while maintaining overwatch for new threats. "This is madness," Reyes groaned from her position trapped beneath a massive boulder. "You're going to get yourselves killed trying to save us." Probably. Ryan's voice echoed from somewhere deep underground. But that's what humans do. We don't calculate acceptable losses when it comes to people we care about. What happened next would be discussed in xenopsychology classes for decades afterward. Despite impossible odds, toxic environments, hostile wildlife, and catastrophic geological events, the three humans successfully extracted every one of their alien classmates from situations that should have been instantly fatal. They carried Quill's crystal fragments in improvised containers while maintaining his life support resonance. They repaired Nex's environmental suit using techniques that violated several laws of physics but somehow worked anyway. They freed Rays from beneath tons of debris using leverage principles and stubborn determination. When Professor Vel-9's voice finally announced the end of the simulation, the alien students found themselves alive in circumstances where mathematical probability suggested they should all have died within the first hour. They had survived not because of their own natural adaptations or advanced technology, but because three humans had refused to accept that their deaths were inevitable. As the chamber returned to normal conditions and medical teams rushed in to treat the various injuries and system failures, Quill managed to achieve partial reformation and addressed the humans with a question that had been building throughout all four simulations. "You're not really from a garden world, are you?" he chimed softly. Alex looked confused by the question. "Earth? Sure, it's a garden world. It's got plants, animals, nice weather most of the time. Why?" "Because," Nex pulsed. From his repaired life support system, "Garden worlds don't produce species like you. Garden worlds create peaceful, contemplative beings who appreciate beauty and harmony. They don't create whatever it is that you are." Ryan considered this while helping medical technicians assess Ray's condition. "I guess it depends on your definition of garden world. Earth is definitely beautiful. It's just that beauty comes with a price. Evolution doesn't let you appreciate sunsets unless you can survive the storms that come with them." Maya was reviewing the simulation data with an expression of mild interest. "You know, these challenges were actually pretty reasonable compared to some of the stuff Earth throws at us regularly. I was expecting something more difficult for the final test." The alien students stared at her in stunned silence. More difficult? They had just survived what was supposed to be the most challenging environment the Academy could simulate, and she thought it should have been harder. Professor Vel-9's mechanical form approached the group, his sensors no doubt recording every detail of their conversation. "Class," he announced, "this concludes our survival simulation program. I trust it has been educational for all participants." "Very educational," Quill chimed, his partially reformed structure showing colors that indicated deep philosophical contemplation. "We learned that humans don't come from a death world. They are the thing that makes worlds dangerous. But more importantly," Rays added, struggling to her feet with human assistance, "we learned that they're also the thing that keeps the rest of us alive when everything goes wrong." Professor Vel-9's optical sensors focused on the three humans, who were helping their alien classmates toward the medical bay with the same casual competence they had shown throughout the simulations. Indeed, the simulations were designed not only to test survival capabilities, but to demonstrate why humans have become such valued members of the galactic community. Their species doesn't just survive in impossible conditions, they make it possible for other species to survive alongside them. As they left the simulation chamber, Nex's bioluminescent patterns showed a mixture of gratitude and awe. "I understand now why they call it humanity facem yeah in the galactic databases." "What do you mean?" Alex asked. "It's not arrogance," Quill explained, his reformed structure showing warm golden colors. "It's not boasting or species superiority. It's just what you do. When faced with impossible odds, when any rational being would give up hope, humans just say yeah, and find a way to make the impossible work." The three humans exchanged glances and smiled. "Pretty much," Maya agreed. That's just how we were raised. And as they helped their alien classmates toward medical treatment and recovery, the students of the Galactic Academy finally understood why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most reliable allies, most determined explorers, and most impossible survivors. It wasn't because Earth was a garden world. It was because Earth was the kind of garden where you had to be absolutely fearless just to smell the flowers.